Well, welcome to Edge Church. It's so fantastic to see you today. Joey Prusak was the manager of Dairy Queen at Dairy Queen in Hopkins, Minnesota. And one day a blind man was ordering an ice cream cone, and as he was placing his order, a $20 bill fell out of his pocket. And the lady behind him reached down and snatched it up. And the man that was there managing Dairy Queen, Joey, looked at the woman and, thought, you're crazy, And then he, after got the man's order, he walked around the counter and he said to the woman, I want you to give that $20 back to that man. I saw what you did. That's not right. You can't do that. And she said, I dropped the $20 bill on the ground and I just reached out and picked it up. It was my own money. Well, Joey took $20 out of his wallet and gave it to the customer who had lost his money. And he told the lady that if she was not going to give it back, that she had to leave the restaurant. So the lady that took the money leaves. He gives $20 to this man who cannot see. And another customer saw what had gone on. And he wrote an email to the owner of the Dairy Queen just to say, man, this guy, Joey, is a stand-up guy. He gave money out of his own wallet. He confronted this lady. He took care of this customer who was blind. And on and on and on. Well, the owner printed it out and put it on the bulletin board there at Dairy Queen. And as people do oftentimes in the 21st century, somebody came up and took a picture of it and put it on Facebook. And the story went viral. Now, all of a sudden, the owner of Dairy Queen is calling Joey. And a man came by and gave a $100 tip to Joey because of what he had done. Another lady came up and handed him an envelope full of cash and said, we've been raising your college fund. But it gets better. Queen Latifah called. Queen Latifah has Joey on her show and says, Joey, what do you like to do? And he says, man, I'm totally into NASCAR. And they presented him with 4 tickets to the Daytona 500, which if you don't know about NASCAR, that's like the Super Bowl of NASCAR. People are going crazy. Warren Buffett calls. Warren Buffett's company actually owns Dairy Queen. And he says, I want to give you an all-expenses-paid trip to come and speak to our board. We need more employees like you, Joey. And the Minnesota hockey team gave him a whole section to a game, And, the guy's a celebrity. He's a star. Everybody's going crazy on the internet and all these kind of things. And I love that story because if Warren Buffett and Queen Latifah and NASCAR know how to bless somebody for their generosity, how much more does our God? How much more does our God? Today I want to talk to you about the power of generosity. Generosity is just one of those things that has a unique power and strength in our lives. Sometimes I realize when we talk about generosity, when we talk about finances, when we talk about money, people get funny. Sometimes people get nervous. People get uncomfortable, if you will, because a lot of times we look at our own financial statement and we're like, man, I'm in debt. I got credit card debt. I got student loans. And so many times we panic when we think about finances because it's uncomfortable. And maybe we're not really where we wish that we were financially, or we in some ways feel like maybe God hasn't taken care of us, or we feel that this is not where we thought we would be. And so there's just a lot of discomfort about the whole subject matter. But today I want to help bring some peace in the middle of what might be a great storm. Bring a little peace. Because one of the number one places of anxiety in a person's life centers around money. And yet God has so much to say to us about His blessings, His provision, His power, His strength in our lives. And I want us to open our Bibles today to the 6th chapter of the Gospel of Luke. Luke chapter 6, verse 37 and 38. Jesus is teaching, and this is the equivalence of the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Luke. Jesus is teaching perhaps his most famous and most well-loved and cherished teachings in Luke 6, 37 and 38. He says, do not judge others, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn others, or it will all come back against you. Forgive others, and you will be forgiven. Give, and you will receive. Your gift will return to you in full, pressed down, shaken together, to make room for more, running over and poured over into your lap. And the amount that you give will determine the amount that you get back. The amount that you give determines what you get back. So generosity is a huge part of a person's spiritual growth. And I want us to look at three specific things here related to this subject of generosity. And one is that generosity enlarges my heart. My heart grows when I'm a generous person. You notice in the text that Jesus is talking about give and it will be given, but right before that he talks about don't judge people, don't condemn people, and don't walk in unforgiveness. What do all four of those things have in common? They're all from the heart. They're heart problems. If I judge you, that's a heart problem. If I have unforgiveness in my heart, that's a heart problem. And here Jesus rolls generosity into the equation with all these other things. And he says, listen, it's a heart problem. So when we develop a heart of generosity, it begins to change our heart. And Jesus is speaking to the heart. Sometimes when we talk about finances, people think, well, that's just a money thing. It's not just a money thing, it's a heart thing. When we get the heart thing in order, then the money thing works itself out. It starts with the heart. It starts with the heart. And so we have a lot of heart problems when it comes to being generous and to giving. I mean, one problem we have is sometimes the problem of pride. We spend money on things that we don't really need, and we waste because we have pride, and we want people to think of us in a certain way. So I have to impress people, so I have to drive this car, even though I can't really afford it. I have to live in this house, even though I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. And so we sometimes are driven by pride, and that gets in the way of developing the heart of generosity. We can't be generous and be prideful all at the same time. However, when we begin to be generous, it begins to push pride out of our lives, and it begins to elevate God, and it brings a humility in us. And then we're like, man, I don't really care what all my neighbors think or what everybody says about me or whatever it may be. It's a heart thing. It's a priority thing. It's a priority thing. It's a pride thing. It's a priority thing. Every one of us has things that we love to spend money on, don't we? Everybody's laughing. Yeah, everybody's like, oh, yeah. You may like to spend money on vacations. Other people may be like, no big deal. Maybe it's houses. Maybe it's cars. Maybe it's whatever. My thing is clothes. I'm telling you, if I wasn't a tither, my kids would be living in the basement, and I would take over their bedrooms with more racks for my clothes. I love it. Love it. Everybody's got their thing they like to spend money on. And here's the thing that begins to happen, though. When we get generous and we begin to follow in God's teachings and what Jesus is saying here in Luke chapter 6, guess what happens? Our heart enlarges. We have a greater capacity. Our priorities change, right? So I used to love to spend it all on this, but now I value the kingdom of God. Now I value God's work. Now I value what God thinks and what God says, and therefore, I'm changing. I'm changing. So our priorities change. Our heart is growing. Now, in this particular passage, Jesus says, don't judge people because you'll be judged. And some people have taken that to mean that you check your moral compass at the door. In the 21st century, people are very sensitive about this. Don't judge me, Jesus is not saying that we shouldn't discern right from wrong. What Jesus is saying is that we shouldn't have a hypercritical attitude and spirit that goes around trying to find fault with others. That's what Jesus is. He's talking about fault finding. If you dislike somebody, you can find something to hate about them. You can sniff around and ask questions and try to trick them and all this. You can do all that stuff. Jesus says if you do that, then people will do that back to you. The seeds that you sow will come back and grow. That's Galatians chapter 6, verse 10. What you sow is what you will reap. So he says, if you reap unforgiveness, what happens? You get people hating on you. I mean, if I am angry and vindictive in the home, my kids see that, guess what? They start doing what I say. How many of you have ever heard your children say something that you were like, I can't believe they said that, then you realize, oh, they heard me say it. Anybody? All right, every parent. Yeah, that's happened to me a few times. I'm like, dang, where did that come from? Oh, that came from me. You know? What you sow is what you will reap back. What we put into the ground is what will bring a harvest in our life. Several years ago, we had the Aurora Theater shooting. Do you guys remember that? One of our church members got shot, Pierce O'Farrell, and he immediately went on the news. They were interviewing him, the media, and he was at the hospital, and they were, Pierce, tell us your experience, and he was like, he said, I forgive the gunman. That was his message. And of course, the media was very critical of that. How in the world could you forgive somebody? This dude just put a bullet in your arm. You almost died. He killed all these people. It was horrific. It was awful. And Pierce said, well, I'm not saying that what the guy did was good. I'm just saying in my heart, I've forgiven him. A couple of Sundays later, after he got out of the hospital, he came and spoke at our church. And we were meeting over at the middle school at the time. We had the place packed out. We actually added a third service that weekend. We had over 700 people packed into the school, and we had more than 10 different media outlets that were there. In fact, we were featured on the national CNN little deal that Sunday afternoon. Some of my friends were calling me, I saw you on CNN, and it was awesome. But the message was simple, forgiveness. And people were saying, Pierce, how could you forgive this person who did something so heinous? And his message is, God has forgiven me. And because God has forgiven me, I can forgive somebody else. That's the heart. And it is to that extent that Jesus is talking. We have to have hearts of unforgiveness. We have to have hearts that are not nitpicking and trying to find fault. And guess what else? We have to have hearts of generosity. Generosity, it starts with the heart. It starts with where we are right here. He says, don't judge others, or then you'll be judged. Do not condemn others, or it will all come back against you. Forgive others, and you will be forgiven. Give, and you will receive. The proverb says it like this: the world of the generous gets larger and larger. The world of the stingy gets smaller and smaller. And the one who blesses others is abundantly blessed. That's the same thing that's being said in Luke chapter 6. And until we can trust God with our money, we cannot fully trust God. So the moment that we say, man, I want to develop that heart of generosity, God, I trust you with my money, then we can trust God with almost anything at that point. For many people, the final frontier of believing and trusting God is in the finances. Many of us are like, man, I'll give God my time. I'll give God my thoughts. I'll give God whatever. Just don't touch that one thing, whatever it may be. But listen, when that begins to happen, then our heart gets enlarged and we begin to think differently. We have different priorities. We're not dominated by pride. We have a different focus. Our heart is enlarged. We're not the same person. And so he says, listen, what's going on here on the inside? I mentioned last week that our church is in a season where we have been through some financial difficulties, and we're needing to raise some more income on a monthly basis to help us stay in our building. And I believe this, we are going to stay in our building, but we've been a little bit short. And I'm telling you that today because I'm asking you, as I've been asking people the last week, to prayerfully consider what you can do to help us, to be a part of the team. We need new people to start tithing. We need maybe some new people to come and get involved in the church and participate with us. Maybe you've been here a while and you haven't been giving, but you want to. This would be a great time to do that, because the good news is we have all the money we need right here in this room, but guess what? It's in your wallet, right? So it's a great opportunity to give. But listen, as much as I want you to give and I want you to help the church stay on track, and as people have been doing in the church, I don't want you to give because you feel like your arm has been twisted. I want you to give because it's in your heart. I want it to come from right here. I don't want you to feel sorry for anybody. I don't want you to feel, I just want it to come from right here, because that's what's beautiful to God, is when it comes out of the heart. And this is the spirit that Jesus is speaking about when he says, give and it will be given to you. We don't give saying, God, I got my hand out now because I gave this check the other day. No, we're giving with this spirit of gratitude in such a way. We know God's going to bless it, but we're not like trying to manipulate or twist God's arm into doing exactly whatever we think He should do. We do so out of that heart of generosity. We also learn this. Generosity empowers my spiritual life. Okay? It empowers my spiritual life. Look at verse 37 again. Give and you will receive. Your gift will return in full to you. What's Jesus saying? When you give and then God blesses it, what happens? What does your faith do? It goes up, doesn't it? It's one of you're calling your Christian friends. You're like, you're not going to believe this, man. I brought this offering. I brought this gift. And God did this. And I can't believe it. And it's amazing. Woo! And then the next time you're praying, you're like, that's no big deal for God. You know? What seemed to be a big deal before is a small deal now. Right? Because your faith is just, no, you know? It's all wet. A lady just stopped me in the hallway. She said, Pastor, you helped me connect something today. And I was like, well, what's going on? She said, well, I got a 10% raise this week. And I said, are you a consistent tither? She said, I am. And I said, isn't that funny? It was 10%. And she goes, you know, I thought I just got a raise, and now I see that's God's provision and blessing in my life. Isn't that good? Yeah, let's connect the dots a little bit, right? Okay? Those of you that are faithful to God and you're in the game, man, God's blessing, don't separate the two. You know, God's blessing and my generosity, two different things. No, it's all together. But it enlarges my faith. My faith grows. My faith gets stronger. I feel closer to God. Practically speaking, giving is one of the easiest areas to start seeing God move in your life. It really is. It's a tangible, measurable type of deal. And this is the law of reciprocity that's being described here by Jesus. What you put in is what you'll get out. One of the great misnomers about generosity is that I give more, I will have less. And Jesus says, no, when you give, it will be given to you. I've got a yardstick here. Does anybody know how long a yardstick is? Yeah, it's a yard. I had to check with my wife before service. I wanted to make sure I got that. It's 36 inches, I think. 35, 36, is that right, 36? So it's 36, yeah, that's what I thought, yeah, good. It's been a while. I haven't been in math class in a while. If I sow a seed, if I give like that, the Bible says that's the blessing that I'll have. If I give like that, that's the blessing. What we sow is what we will reap, right? What we sow is what we'll reap. Sometimes those blessings are spiritual. In fact, they're always spiritual when you give to God. Many times they're monetary gifts, though, too. I don't want to miss that. We are blessed. So think today about your own involvement and think about where am I on the yardstick and what kind of blessing would I like to receive, right? Give and it'll be given back. Give and it will be given unto you, he says. So it starts with the heart, but then it draws me closer to God. It's a promise from God. This is a promise. Did Jesus stutter? No. Did Jesus hesitate? No. This is like plain English. Give and it will be given. Give and it will be given. Practice the spirit of generosity. God will do something awesome. Now listen, this word give is in the present tense in the language of the New Testament. Ron, what does that mean? What that means is it's a continual action. Okay, keep on giving is probably the best translation. In other words, be faithful, live a lifestyle of generosity. Jesus is not saying you put one little seed in the ground and then all of a sudden you expect to have a forest. When you live a lifestyle of generosity, God says, then I will bless that. I'll bless it. It's a lifestyle, man. Everybody say it's a lifestyle. Yeah, it's a lifestyle. Yeah, God's not looking for one-hit wonders, man. He's looking for people who's just a lifestyle. Just a part of what we do. It's who we are, you know. Every month, man. Every time that pay period comes around, I'm going to be faithful to God. Generosity also unlocks the power of God. It unlocks the power of God. Look at verse 38. Give and you will receive. Your gift will return to you in full, pressed down, shaken together, to make room for more, running over, poured out into your lap, and the amount that you give will determine the amount that you get back. In the ancient world, when you went into the market to get some grain, an honest salesperson would take the bag and fill it with grain, and guess what they would do? They would shake it. They would press it down so they could put some more on top, right? That was an honest salesperson. The people that just scooped a little grain in there and gave you back, here you go, buddy. Those were the shady people you had to watch out for. This is what Jesus is talking about. It's pressed down, it's shaken together, and then what? Then it's overflowing, and he says, and it's overflowing even into your lap. How about that? Is that good? Yeah, it's in your lap. The amount you give will determine the amount that you get back, the New Living Translation says. So it's been pressed down, it's been shaken together. In other words, God is a God of blessing, right? He's a God of blessing. I mean, it's not just like God just put a little on top. Now, I was eating at one of my favorite restaurants the other day. I'm not going to say the name because I invited some people to church from over there, and you may be here today, but it was one of those restaurants where you go through and you tell them what you want, kind of like Qdoba or Chipotle, even though it wasn't that. And I got to the meat section, and I said, I'll have some meat, and they said, okay. And the lady literally put 2 tiny scraps of meat on top of the meat. I'm hungry, man. I mean, I'm nice. I'm a pastor, but don't mess with my food. I will come for you. And I said to the lady, I said, ma'am, I felt like a little kid asking my mom, could I please have some more meat? You know, like please. I felt like saying, I'll pay 25 more cents. I don't care. And she said, we have been under scrutiny from headquarters. The portion control police have been out here, and we have been giving too generous of portions to people. We've been busted. She was like looking around like, oh, they're coming for me, you know. Put me in the cuffs. Woo! So I took my little 2 scraps of meat, and I got to tell you, I was so stinking hungry after lunch. I'm like, I'm a grown boy, man. Feed me. Good night. I never went back to that restaurant, just between us, right? I was like a valued customer. I had my point card, you know, and they hadn't heard from me since then because I'm just scared I'm going to be hungry when I leave, you know. Looking for the 2 scraps of meat. Listen, what God is talking about is not the 2 scraps of meat. He's talking about something that is pressed down, shaken together, and overflowing. Yeah. Have you ever opened a bag of chips? The big bag of chips, it's all bag. There ain't nothing there. I was going to watch a ball game the other day, and I went and I got my favorite chips, and I was like, had the game on, and I was like ready, and I had like my favorite soda, and I was so into it, and I opened the bag of chips, and it was a bag like this big. There was like this many chips in it. I was like, what happened? It's all air. That's crazy, man. Could you just put like some chips in it, right? That's not God's way. God is not in the chip business. He's not. He's not in the 2 scraps of meat business. Philippians says, whatever your need is, God will meet your need. Right? So, sometimes we look at our finances, we're like, man, this is hopeless. Did you know with God, I want to encourage you today. With God, your finances are never hopeless. It's never over. It's never so dire that God can't intervene. You just have to let him in, though. You got to just say, God, I'm going to let you in on this deal. God, I need your help. I'm going to do my part, God. See, he says, give. That's my part. That's what does God want me to do. And it shall be given. That's God's part. Right? It shall be given from God. We have a divine partnership. There is God, there is me. When we're jiving together, guess what? I'm walking in blessing. I'm walking in abundance. See, a lot of people, when they do their finances, we do this all every month, don't we? We do this personally. If you own a business, you run a business, you do this. The question every month is, how much do we bring in and how much do we spend? And what's the difference, right? Am I in the black or in the red? That's the question. And if you're a bookkeeper, you really ask that question. If you're just somebody that just trying to keep your family afloat, you ask that question. All of us do, whether you run a business or not. What we have to remember, though, is this. God's math God's equation is different. God's equation is not A plus B equals C. God's equation is, what did I bring in? What did I spend? And then there's an X factor, and that's the God factor. And we got to put God into the equation. So it's, what did I bring in? What did I spend? And what's God going to do? That equals the result. See, when we just look at our finances purely from a debit and a credit perspective, and I can say this, one of the classes, I took 2 classes in college 3 times, and one of them was Accounting 101. And you know what? When you take a class 3 times, you start to get good. I'm like, dang, this is familiar. I already had some of the assignments done. I already owned the textbooks, I just kept signing up for the class. I picked different professors, thinking it would be easier. It was all bad, though. The one thing, I changed my major after that, But one of the things I learned is what a debit and a credit was. I did get that right. And so we think about the debits and the credits. But let's don't take God out of the equation, right? Because you never know what God's going to do. You never know. Let's leave room for some faith, amen? Let's do that. Generosity unlocks the power of God. It unlocks the power of God. We have a little thing called the 90-day tithe challenge here at Edge Church. And I'd love for you to participate with us in this. It's just a challenge to help the people of God begin to develop the spirit of generosity that the Bible outlines. And to kind of illustrate this, I wanted to share an email from a family in our church that many of you know Tessa and Eric Langfield. If you've been here before, you know who they are. They wrote a little email to me, just a word of encouragement, and they said I could share this with you guys. And this is what Tessa wrote. During the 90-day tithe challenge, Eric and I went back and forth about making a commitment to tithe. Eric struggled with the thought that it was just the church asking for money instead of understanding it was a choice to follow God in obedience. After reading The Blessed Life, which is a book that we give out here at the church, we understood better that our tithing was bringing what belonged to God. We greatly desired to bring our tithe to the feet of the Christ through our church, and we also came to a better understanding that the giving of our time through serving was not the same as bringing the first fruits of our earnings. Our desire was to have our hearts, family, and finances in obedience to God. The first blessing happened as a result of obedience was called what I had asked God for. God blessed our marriage. Eric struggled to be the leader of our family, and I struggled to let him. As with any marriage, there have been bumps and problems, but I had to learn to trust God that He would lead my husband, who would then in turn lead me. My husband became more financially minded and desiring a budget after disliking them for an entire 21 years of our marriage. Our relationship became more trusting and loving, and it's not the same marriage as it was before. That's awesome, guys. How many people are like, our marriage needs to get better. Let's tithe. Most people don't think that. That sounds kind of weird. But listen, when you start putting God first, it's not weird. It starts to kind of make sense. Okay, this gets better. Then, I didn't make this up, by the way, okay? They sent this to me. Then we both decided we were going to set money aside that at any time we felt God telling us as an offering or a sacrificial gift, we'd be able to obey Him immediately. This money was untouched, even during times we really needed it. We sacrificed somewhere else. We were able to bless others in a need through financial gifts that God wanted us to bring them. We became conduits. We wanted others to see God's love through this act. Each time the gift was anonymously given and either left with a note saying this is a gift for you from God or given through a third party. Then our third month into this journey, okay, they only been doing this 3 months. Okay, check this out. Eric's company approached him about a promotion they wanted to give him, and he didn't even have to apply or interview. They just gave it to him, and this promotion came with several blessings. First of all, my husband got a 10% pay raise, which we were able to move out of our apartment into a house, and then our rent decreased $500 a month. He provided absolutely everything we needed to move and more. We even had to pay the full rent for 2 places in November, but God provided for that as well. Is that not amazing? Come on, can we give God some praise for this? And here's what's so awesome, church. These are normal people. They hadn't been missionaries in Africa. You know, these are normal folks. They look like you and me. They're just normal people doing life, just normal folks. God can do something awesome in you. You know what they discovered? They had been waiting on God for financial miracles, and what they discovered is that God was waiting on them.
That's right.
I wonder how many of us say, you've been praying, God, please do something, God. And God's like, I'm ready, baby, but you got to get on my team. I'm waiting on you. I'm waiting on you. When we begin to step into what God has purposed for us to do, God says, then I'll take care of the rest. I'll take care of the rest. God may be waiting on us. When we feel like we're waiting on God, sometimes we have a scarcity mentality. We live by anxiety and fear, uncertainty, never having enough. I got to preserve everything I've got because I don't know what tomorrow is. But when we begin to learn this, that everything we had was from God in the first place, there's not one thing that you've got that wasn't God's blessing. God gave you all that. He gave it all to you. And when we're like, you know what, all my stuff is God's stuff anyway, so if I need to give a proportion to God, no big deal. I'd love to do that. In fact, what an honor, you know? My wife said, you know what, Ryan, if people are hung up on the 10%, why don't they should just give 11, right? I mean, that's great. Like, we're not limited by that. So, church, let's step forward in bold faith. Let's develop big hearts. Let's unlock the power of God in our life, because Jesus said this, give, and it will be given to you. Let's pray together. Let's bow for a word of prayer.